The personal life of King Louis XIV was filled with quite intriguing details. Of course, in that era, European monarchs often had a large number of mistresses and favorites, but this particular ruler showed remarkable taste in his preference for ladies, and physical beauty was far from always the deciding factor for him. Moreover, the monarch had a very peculiar fetish. As some historical sources claim, it was this very strangeness that, in a sense, predetermined the fate of all modern women. But let's take it one step at a time. Louis XIV went down in history as the Sun King. According to legend, he received this elegant nickname at the age of 5 after seeing the reflection of the sun and himself in a puddle. "I am the sun," exclaimed the young heir. From then on, he was known by that name. It cannot be said that Louis was of weak health from a young age, but throughout his life, he repeatedly found himself on the brink of life and death. At 5, he nearly drowned in a palace pond. At 10, he suffered a severe case of smallpox. At 15, he was diagnosed with a benign tumor in his chest, and at 19, the king contracted typhoid fever. The latter illness left its mark for his entire life, as the high toxicity of the typhoid medications caused him to permanently lose his luxurious hair, forcing him to wear a wig for the rest of his days. But these are minor details. Who would pay attention to a lack of hair when faced with the king himself? Furthermore, after the age of 30, Louis suffered from erectile inflammation due to his passion for enemas. I mentioned this in a previous video, but even this did not deter his women. Throughout his life, the king tried to resist feminine charms for the sake of state affairs, but he invariably failed. When Louis turned 14, his mother, Anne of Austria, concluded that he needed a mistress. According to her plan, this woman had to be well known to her, loyal to the ruling dynasty, and very importantly, highly skilled in the arts of love, yet exceptionally unattractive, so that the young monarch would not fall in love with her. The choice fell on Catherine Bellier, a 40-year-old chambermaid and the palace's chief expert in enemas. The latter craft she had mastered to perfection. In amorous affairs, Catherine was also extremely experienced. Though married for many years, she constantly changed lovers, who even included a bishop, and her husband apparently did not object. The main thing was that his wife held a high position and brought income to the family. However, Catherine was outwardly ugly. A surviving plaster cast of her face shows she had serious problems with her eyes. Chronicles even contain records that one of her eyes was not only crossed but completely blind. Large lips and a toothless mouth completed the picture. Catherine even had a telling nickname, One-Eyed Cateau. It was she who initiated the young king into the mysteries of love. Their affair lasted for 2 years, after which Louis's mother granted her a lifetime pension for her services. Then, Louis managed to get acquainted with all his mother's other ladies-in-waiting. At 15, he was royally bold and reckless. When he turned his attention to the daughters of his unofficial stepfather, the Queen Mother decided to urgently marry him off to his first cousin, the Spanish Infanta Maria Teresa. And it must be said, Louis effectively ruined her life and crushed all her political ambitions. From the very beginning, Louis's 22-year-old bride, upon arriving at her future husband's court, felt extreme discomfort. She struggled to learn French, and the norms of local etiquette seemed alien and unpleasant to her. Fortunately, her mother-in-law, Louis's mother, was by her side. It was she who helped her new daughter-in-law adapt and not become completely lost at court. Then came the children. Maria Theresa gave birth to 6, but only one son survived to adulthood. It is believed that the reason for such high infant mortality in this couple was inbreeding. As a reminder, Maria and Louis were first cousins. And that's just the 5 deceased children. How many pregnancies were lost? During her pregnancies, Maria Theresa tried to move as little as possible. She was carried in a palanquin, but miscarriages still occurred. Meanwhile, Louis did not waste any time and acquired more and more new favorites and temporary mistresses. Maria Theresa knew about many of them and was even personally acquainted with them, which did nothing to alleviate her anguish. The common people found this amusing, and seeing the king walking with his wife and favorites, they would joke, "The king is walking his 3 queens." The monarch not only amused himself with his favorites but also spent incredible sums on them, sometimes even more than on his own wife, took them on travels, and acknowledged all his illegitimate children. It is hard to imagine what the unfortunate Maria Theresa, whose short life was dedicated to childbearing, must have felt. She once even extracted a promise from Louis that he would stop his infidelities by his 30th birthday. But Louis turned 30, and then 40, and his womanizing did not cease. Maria Theresa died at the age of 45 from sepsis after a botched medical procedure. Louis himself said that her death was the only disappointment she had ever caused him in their entire married life of just over 20 years. The king's amorous adventures are worthy of a separate novel. His first official favorite was a woman nicknamed the Limper, who had injured her leg in childhood and walked with a slight limp for the rest of her life. Her name was Louise de La Vallière. A noblewoman, she served as a lady-in-waiting to the wife of Prince Philippe, Louis's own brother. Overall, Louise was a modest provincial girl with an unremarkable appearance, who did not attract much male attention. And she became the king's favorite quite unintentionally. The fact is, Louis had an affair with Henriette, the wife of his brother Philippe, who preferred men. Their mother found out and strictly forbade Louis from continuing the sinful liaison. However, he disobeyed her and, together with Henriette, devised a cunning plan to publicly court one of her ladies-in-waiting to divert suspicion. Henriette chose her plainest servant for this role, Louise. But something went wrong, and the king genuinely fell in love with her. The couple had 4 children, 2 of whom survived. Louise received a ducal title and her own castle. Generally, Louise was not, as we would say today, overly materialistic, though she did not refuse lavish gifts. And everything was wonderful until Louis fell in love again. This time, his choice fell on the complete opposite of Louise. Her name was Françoise Athenaise de Montespan. She was an incredibly vibrant and extremely domineering married lady. Perhaps for extra thrill, the king housed Athenaise in apartments adjacent to Louise's chambers. And while Athenaise was cool about it, after all, Louis preferred her, Louise suffered deeply knowing and sometimes even hearing where and how her beloved Louis was spending his time. The final straw was Louis's demand that Louise become the godmother to his and Athenaise's daughter. In total, Montespan bore him 8 children. The very next day, Louise decided to retreat to a convent. From that moment, a truly luxurious life began for Athenaise. Louis spared no expense for her. In the new Palace of Versailles, she was allocated 20 rooms, while the queen had only 10. Behind her back, Athenaise was often called the Sultana. This domineering woman shamelessly meddled in politics, influencing the fates of officials, and even allowed herself to make sharp remarks about the queen. However, it cannot be said that everything was smooth sailing. Besides his official favorite, Louis had a host of other mistresses who also managed to bear him children. By the way, I mentioned that at the beginning of her relationship with the king, Athenaise was married. Her husband, a jealous aristocrat, repeatedly caused scenes with the monarch himself, complained about his sorrows to the courtiers, and even reported the king to his wife Maria Theresa. But it was all in vain. After receiving substantial financial compensation from the king for moral damages, the cuckolded husband held a symbolic funeral for his wife. In his family crypt, an empty coffin appeared with the name of the adulteress carved on the tombstone. But Montespan's happiness was not eternal either. The lady bored the king with her endless whims and was forced to leave the court. As penance for her sins, she wore a belt with sharp spikes pressing into her body for the rest of her life, and even tried to reconcile with her husband, but he rejected her. The next favorite of our hero was Françoise d'Aubagne, a friend of the very same Montespan, whom she had imprudently hired as a governess for her and the king's children. The daughter of a murderer and a counterfeiter, she had a meek disposition and was the complete opposite of the domineering Montespan. For 2 years, Françoise remained impregnable, which utterly charmed the king. But then a new misfortune struck. The king's lawful wife fell seriously ill. His wife's death greatly changed Louis. He suddenly realized how sinful a life he had led and decided to legally marry Françoise. However, she never officially became queen, formally remaining in the status of the king's favorite. The courtiers could not understand what the king saw in Françoise. William of Orange even joked about it, remarking that the French king was the complete opposite of other monarchs. He had young ministers but an old mistress. Françoise was indeed 3 years older than the king. But this woman proved to be very reserved and cold in their relationship, and Louis soon grew bored, seeking solace with a new lady. Nevertheless, Françoise's position at court remained unshakable until the king's death. Yes, King Louis always had plenty of women, but he had one very piquant interest. He wanted to witness the process of childbirth firsthand, to see it with his own eyes, so to speak. In that era, in Europe, as in the Ottoman Empire, women gave birth on special birthing chairs. A vertical or seated body position was considered the most natural. It was not always convenient for the midwives attending the birth, but it was optimal for the woman in labor. One day, the king attended such a classic birth but could not make out anything that was happening. Then, likely on someone's advice, he ordered his mistresses to give birth lying down, in a horizontal position, while he watched the event from behind a screen so as not to embarrass them. This fashion for horizontal births was quickly adopted by other aristocratic families, and then by commoners. Midwives also quickly realized that in this position, it was easier for them to control the process. Soon this practice spread to other European countries. So, it is to this king that modern women owe the fact that at such a crucial moment in their lives, they are in a lying down position.